Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to 5 ways British and American yards, or gardens as we call them, are very different. Now, this should be an interesting one because a lot of people in America have front yards or front porches, and we don't have that here. Like, you just have a front door, and then your cars are usually parked in front, and then you have the garden, the back garden. So it's going to be interesting to see the other differences here, because Lawrence has obviously lived in the UK, he was born and raised here and then moved to the States, so he'll have a really great gauge of the key differences here. So yeah, this should be a fun one. Let's do it.
Sprinklers, I suppose, are pretty essential, and I can tell you from experience, on a hot summer's day, if you're walking down the street and one of them accidentally goes off on you, it can be quite a pleasant experience, unless you're carrying your phone.
That'd be a nightmare.
Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to gardens, or should I say, yards, because that's the first memo really. When Americans say that the dogs are playing outside in the yard, that's equivalent to the British saying that the dogs are playing outside in the garden. And actually, while we're on the subject, does anybody else 21 years later wonder if that person ever let the dogs in? Whoever it was, there's a safe bet that those dogs would have experienced a much different yard/garden depending on whether they were in Britain or America. And since, over the last year, I've done videos outlining the differences between British and American houses, kitchens and bathrooms, I thought now would be a great time to do the same thing with residential yards.
Makes sense.
And you might be thinking, why would you do a video like this right now when nobody gives a lick about their gardens? And the truth is, I miss having a garden. And also those videos are being picked up by the YouTube algorithm right now, so I want to capitalise. And so without further ado, here are those ways that British and American yards are very different.
Ambiance. Ambiance. Yeah,
I love that sound.
That's
the truth is, on a warm summer's day, you really can't beat the quiet, relaxing ambience of either country's yards. But think back to summer, think back to your childhood. What is the overriding sound? It could be dogs barking or a builder putting down a mug.
For sure.
But in my experience, if you strip away all of that, the most consistent sound in both countries comes from things with wings. Across much of Britain, the winged creature in question is a wood pigeon. Yeah. They hang out in people's gardens. That's what they do. And they make this noise that you don't really hear very often in the United States, and that noise is this.
Oh yeah.
Sorry to the wood pigeon community for that. And while we certainly have types of pigeons in the United States, this large bugger isn't one of them. Look at him. He's already had 3 courses. He's going in for his second dessert. Greedy bastard. On the other hand, when I think
that bird needs to get on Slim Fast.
Think of the soundtrack to American yards, there's only one creature that comes to mind. Chainsaw Jim from next door, but also crickets. Now, we've talked about these excitable creatures before on Lost in the Pond, so I won't be propagating their sinful activities any further. But suffice to say, that recognisable sound, so that was a bee, that was awful, is very prevalent throughout Midwestern summers. In Britain, the same is true of these.
Clothing lines.
For a country that's reluctant to air its dirty laundry in public, Britain has no problem doing just that with clothes straight out of the washing machine. Now, there are some drawbacks to doing this. Number one,
this is a lot less popular now though because of the rain, and people just having dryers now.
The pegs can help deteriorate the fabric. And number 2, it takes flipping ages. But on the plus side, it's eco-friendly.
It is
your clothes flap in the wind in a really pleasing way, and they end up smelling like Britain. But after moving to America, I was surprised to find a distinct lack of washing lines in people's yards. And that makes it sound like I've been snooping, but the truth is, I have. Now, of course, there will be Americans watching this going, we have a clothesline, because all Americans sound like Kermit the Frog for some reason. Or, we had a clothesline in the 70s, or whatever. Right, there are exceptions. And there are a couple of good reasons for this. Firstly, the United States doesn't do the whole let's have a washer and dryer in one combined unit thing. They just have really effective dryers. And the second reason is that in parts of the United States, homeowners associations have actually moved to ban it, citing them as eyesores that could devalue the property. However, a few years ago, several states did pass right to dry laws, which specifically forbid those associations placing ban on clotheslines. But even with a sharper gaze on the environmental benefits, America still ain't got nothing on Britain. Of course, if my neighbours are so reluctant to see my socks and my underpants and that mysterious Princess Leia bikini, perhaps they should consider the size of this.
I have to say, like when we started using dryers, like our energy bill went way up. They just consume a lot of energy.
Firstly, let me clarify, if you're confused and you think the word fencing is used here to indicate that British people use their gardens for sword fighting, you're wrong. That was phased out in the 90s. Fencing as in the protective perimeter around your yard. And in Britain, front yards don't so much as have a fence, but often a brick wall and a gate. These walls can range in height from half a Danny DeVito to an entire Danny DeVito. It's also not uncommon in Britain for both the front and the backyard to be surrounded by a hedge. Where you might see a fence, usually that of the wooden variety, is in the back garden, and this is often replicated in the United States. But there are a couple of areas within the world of fences that America does things differently. Firstly, I was kind of thrown aback by the vast amount of front yards that don't have anything. Not a fence, not a hedge, not an army of gnomes. And on the one hand, I like this because it seems quite inviting, but on the other, it does encourage people to trespass onto Chainsaw Jim's yard. What Chainsaw Jim really needs is a white picket fence, something that's famously common to the United States. But one area where fencing tends to be more prevalent is the American backyard. And while this can indeed include wooden fences, there's one type of fence you'll see here that is not common in Britain: chain link. And I understand that most Americans probably don't give these fences a second thought. But to me, they're amazing, and one of these days I'm going to install one so tall I can use my garden to have a steel cage match. When I entered my first spring here in the United States, one thing that really stood out to me was the prevalence of sprinklers. People stick them out of their front lawns, and we don't do this in the UK because our sprinklers are placed in the clouds. But because of a Midwestern climate that doesn't really lend itself to effective lawn care, sprinklers, I suppose, are pretty essential. And I can tell you from experience, on a hot summer's day, if you're walking down the street and one of them accidentally goes off on you, it can be quite a pleasant experience unless you're carrying your phone. Once again, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you'll know that there are two constants: my confused expression and the fact that my videos always come back to size. And yards are absolutely no different. Let me tell you a story. When I was approximately one Danny DeVito tall, I, like any child, used to play in my garden. By Britain's standards, this garden was of relatively average size. So whenever my rich friend from the village over invited me round to his, I couldn't believe that his garden was so big that his dad had built him a miniature railway. By Britain's standards, this could have been the garden of a millionaire. Or not, because after moving to the United States, I realized that no, that's the size of everyone's garden here. In that childhood garden, But
you guys have so much more land, so it makes sense. You know, America's such a big country. You guys have got so much space.
Banned from playing soccer because you're only ever 5 feet away from the kitchen window. However, at my in-laws' house in Indiana, I don't think I could have hit the window if I'd tried, and I did try.
Miscellaneous.
Now, before we finish, a quick rapid fire of miscellaneous items. Hanging flower baskets. Which country does them more? Britain. Gnomes. Garden gnomes.
Probably
Britain again, although you do find them in the US according to my Twitter feed. Barbecue pits, definitely America. I don't remember seeing one of those at all in Britain. We do have barbecues, but we don't have the pit often. I don't think anyway. I never had one. Why didn't I have one? Mom? Dad? Bugs. I'm not sure that either country has more bugs than the other. They just have different types. Midwestern gardens will get way more mosquitoes, fireflies, things like that. Britain, you'll see more slugs and snails than you do here. Who has more flowers in their garden? Again, this might come down to the type rather than the quantity. But having said that, I think British gardens can be perceived to be more flowery because their gardens are smaller, so they have to pack more in. Which country's gardens are more likely to have a pond? I don't know. The answer to that question is lost in one. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below.
Another fun video from Lawrence. It's always interesting to see how we pretty much have the same stuff in the US and the UK, but there's just slight tweaks. And those tweaks, when you really think about it, are completely understandable due to the size of the countries. Like, of course, you guys are going to have bigger gardens. You're going to have, the sprinklers because your gardens are bigger. Hence, to walk around on a hot summer's day with a with a jar of water, like a watering pot, is going to be, quite tedious, especially if you're working. So why not have like an automated system? Whereas if you've got a small garden, going around it will take you maybe 10 minutes, and plus it's nice to do. Yeah, really interesting video. I would love to see how big is the average American garden, because I would love a huge garden. Just to be able to throw like a rugby ball as hard as I can, and are they big enough for you to be able to throw a football as far as you can? Like, how big is your yard? Let me know. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.